Ontario's capital city was a very different place in 1894, but if you think it was staid or homogeneous and bland, Carolyn Weitzman's new book tells a tale that might challenge that assumption. It is a real whodunit. It's called Clara at the Door with a Revolver: The Scandalous Black Suspect, the Exemplary White Son, and the Murder That Shocked Toronto. And it brings Carolyn Weitzman back to our studio. Great to see you again.
Lovely to see you.
Let's just hit this on the top. This is a true story.
It is. It's way too strange to be fiction.
Well, I was going to say, it's way too strange to be believable, but it actually happened.
It actually happened, and I'm interested to hear what you think is the most strange aspect of the book.
Well, I mean, I almost don't know where to begin. There's 10 different things that could answer that question. But let's start with this. How did you find this story to begin with?
Okay, so 20 years ago, when I was doing my PhD, which was on housing policy in Parkdale, I was looking for examples of people living close by to one another who weren't of the same class, the same background. And I came across a story written in the 1960s about a woman who had been accused of killing her former neighbor, a Black woman, an impoverished woman, a woman who occasionally wore men's clothes, was accused of killing a rich white young man. And I became interested partly for the social history of it and started reading all the newspapers. And then I became quite passionately interested in Clara herself, the accused woman herself.
Had no one told this story before?
You see it every few years in the Toronto Star. There was a story in the Toronto Star last year, and I got very upset and wrote them a note.
Upset about what?
Upset that the same lies have been repeated for 125 years. You see it occasionally on websites. There is one plaque in Toronto. I saw it yesterday in front of the Adelaide Street York House courthouse that mentions the infamous acquittal of Clara Ford.
You say you got sort of upset with the Star because they have repeated the same lies that have been told numerous times over the years.
Yeah.
Like for what example?
Clara has been treated as an eccentric or possibly insane woman who had a very good lawyer and thus got away with murder. It's my contention, based on the contemporary reporting, and which also had her testimony almost verbatim, and she was the first woman, second person to testify on her own behalf, that she was eminently sane, she was very smart, she was a performer, she was a person who knew how to use humor to get people on side, that she saved herself, and that she was not, going around shooting people because she was an angry Black woman or because she was prone to violence.
Okay, but is it fair to say if it's 1894 in Toronto and you're a Black woman dressing up as a man and a lesbian, that makes you a bit unusual?
She certainly got the attention of the police because of those factors.
What was life like in the 1890s in this city for Black people?
So in 1861, when Clara was born, a lot of American refugees had come up from the United States because before the Civil War, there was something called the Fugitive Slave Act, which made people like the person I say is Clara's father come from Illinois, where he was a free man, but ran the risk of being kidnapped. So Toronto in 1861 had about 500 Black people living in what was then a fairly small city and actually having some influence in political affairs. But by the 1890s, when Clara was on trial, it was again 5,000 Black people within what was now a city of 250,000 instead of, say, 80,000. And it was a completely different atmosphere for Black people. Canada had prided itself on being a temporary haven for those refugees in the years before the Civil War, but by the 1890s, they were seen still as outsiders, as not real Canadians, etc. So actually, attitudes had harshened towards Black people in Toronto and in Canada by the late 19th century.
Mind you, we've had other people on this program during Black History Month who have said there's a reason why the Underground Railroad terminus, one of them was in Toronto, because relatively speaking, given the times, Toronto was a pretty good place to be Black in North America. That's what I've been told by black historians.
Yeah, and as I say, things change over time, and some things get worse instead of better. So definitely, William Lyon Mackenzie said in the 1830s.
That's the first mayor of Toronto.
The first mayor of Toronto, absolutely. I should have explained that. And the grandfather of William Lyon Mackenzie King. He said that in Toronto, black people can have white people as servants. And that was true. There is at least one case of a barber who had white people working for him. But at the same time, when William Lyon Mackenzie said that, black people could still technically be slaves. It was before 1834, before the British Empire abolished slavery. So it was equivocal.
Okay, we know who Clara Ford is, you've told us. Let's find out about the victim. This is Frank Westwood, who was killed. 18-year-old kid? And what do we know about him?
Well, at that time, he would have been considered a young adult. He'd just graduated from Parkdale High School, which still exists, and he had just started work downtown. He was the son of a wealthy industrialist who made boats and boat accessories, and they lived by the shore on Lake Ontario, where the Gardiner Expressway is now. But then it was a place that they had their own boathouse, and they were Frank was very interested in boats. He was a young, good-looking man, and when he was shot, one of the first thoughts was "Cherchez la femme," or "There must be a girl in it."
All right, so let's go to the most plausible theory which connects Ford and Westwood. What is it?
So the most plausible theory is that Frank had tried to sexually assault or had sexually assaulted Clara. When Clara confessed, and Clara did confess when she was arrested by the police, she said that Frank had assaulted her in Parkdale during the summer, and that she had returned in October 6th, in order to exact revenge on Frank. She later retracted her confession. She said she'd been forced into a false confession by the police.
Do you have any evidence that you've uncovered that suggests, yes, in fact, she was coerced to make that confession?
Well, let's put it this way. I argue in the book that she was treated in a way that a white woman wouldn't have been treated at that time. At that time, the police would arrest you. They might ask you a few questions, but essentially they'd put you in jail the very next day. You'd appear before the magistrate. What happened with Clara was that the police first started questioning her at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and it was 11 or 11:30 when she gave the confession. She wasn't given the opportunity to bring in a friend. You wouldn't have been able to bring in a lawyer in those days unless you could pay for one, but she didn't have the opportunity to bring in a friend or family member. The police were very excited when Clara came up. This was 6 weeks after the murder, and they were being mocked for not having a suspect, and they were doing everything they could to create an airtight case, including a confession, and they went too far.
Do you want to describe some of the details around the murder?
He was shot at his front door on a Saturday night after he'd been out with some friends. His mother was home waiting for him. They spoke for a brief period of time, then they turned off the light. Then Frank went downstairs. His mother didn't hear the doorbell ring, but she assumed that the doorbell had rung. He opened the door, she heard a shot, she ran downstairs. Frank lived for a short period after being shot. He said that he'd been shot by a middle-aged, heavy-set man wearing a dark overcoat, wearing a fedora with a mustache. Almost immediately, the attention was paid to Gus Clark, who had been Frank's next-door neighbor and who was, and again, you couldn't make it up, he was a vibrator salesman by day and a burglar by night. He'd been in jail a couple of times. He was a few years older than Frank. He was 23.
Did he have a motive for killing Frank?
Yes, he had been shot at by Frank's father, Benjamin Westwood, several weeks earlier in an incident over a theft at the boathouse.
Now, what led the police to Clara when obviously Westwood thought, we got somebody dead to rights here, and he's identified this other guy?
Gus was a very fishy fellow, and Gus didn't directly speak to the police, but he did speak to a reporter when he was somewhat in his cups. He was somewhat drunk, and he said, "I don't know why the police are paying any attention to me. There used to be a woman who lived with her mother and 2 children in the back of our house, and she had 2 revolvers, and sometimes dressed in men's clothes, and really didn't like Frank." And then the police went, and they turned their attention to Clara.
Here's how you describe it in the book. You write Clara was characterized by the media as a monster. And this is an excerpt now from an article in the Globe and Mail. No, excuse me, it wasn't the Globe and Mail yet, it was just the Mail, right?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
I think that's right. Here we go. She currently is reported by the Parkdale children to drink a quart of warm blood every morning, going around heavily armed on all occasions with the strength of any 2 or 3 men. Why was she characterized thus?
There were 7 newspapers in Toronto at the time, and they were engaged in a furious circulation war. So in many cases, as I show in the book, they took a story. For instance, Clara being harassed in the streetcar, getting off with 2 men who had been harassing her, and either slapping or hitting one. And the next day, it was like, Clara is known to possess the strength of 2 men. And the day after that, it would be, Clara is a professional boxer. The newspapers were all trying to win this circulation war and using fantastical stories about Clara in order to win that circulation war.
Shall we show a picture here? Sheldon, you want to bring this up here? Let's take a look at this picture. Carolyn, if you'd look over at the wall there. Okay, these are supposedly, and for those listening on podcast and can't see it, these are 2 sort of cartoons allegedly depicting Clara Ford. They kind of, I don't know, I guess, you want to describe what the significance of these 2 images is?
Well, the part of the newspaper journalism was that they would take sketches, and these are 2 sketches that are taken of the same woman at the same time. Woman at the left can only be described as mannish, heavy brow, and the woman at the right can only be described as looking much younger and much more feminine. So it really depended on whether you were going to be selling newspapers on the basis that Clara Ford is an innocent victim railroaded by the police, or whether you're going to be selling newspapers saying that Clara is a monster, is a homosexual, is a person who doesn't even need a motive, because why should mad people have motives?
Do I remember this correctly? Maybe I don't. You're going to help me out here. Is this the first time the word homosexual has been used in the popular press in Toronto history?
Well, I looked in a whole bunch of North American newspapers to check that out, and it does appear to be the first use of the term homosexual. So a book by Kraft Ebing had just been published in 1893, just translated using the term homosexual. Clara was being described actually as a what would now be called transgendered, but in other words, uncomfortable within her female body, more closely identifying with being a man. However, the journalist Hector Charlesworth, whose account of the trial became the basis of a lot of the lies told about Clara, was using the term homosexual to describe Clara, and indeed I haven't found an earlier mention in any North American newspaper.
What was the court like during her trial?
Well, packed, first of all. Smelly. Apparently, the courtroom was infamous for being smelly. But there were, by the time of her trial, which was in May of 1895, there was a solid group of people who felt that Clara was being railroaded by the police. Sentiment against the police was quite high at the time. So there were a bunch of people who were very passionately wanting to see her convicted. The assumption was that she would be convicted, but there were also some people who were on her side. The trial lasted 4 days, which sounds like a very short period of time, but quite often cases, including capital cases where there could be someone hanged at the end, were decided in a day. And Clara became, as I say, the first person to testify on her own behalf. And she testified for 3.5 hours, and you could hear a pin drop during her testimony.
Where was the trial heard?
The trial was heard in Adelaide Street Courthouse. I was looking at the outside again today. It still exists. And it was, there were a whole bunch of tables in the front and people frantically sketching Clara for this historic event, and a bunch of spectators in the back crowding for a spot.
And what is the Adelaide Courthouse today?
It is a fancy Italian restaurant.
Okay, very good. She have a lawyer?
She had two lawyers. She had the lawyer that she'd picked up when, during her preliminary hearing, who is a fellow named William Murdoch, but he's not the William Murdoch from the Murdoch Mysteries. I want to make that perfectly clear. Okay. And he was sort of a journeyman lawyer. And then she had a lawyer who was much better known, named EFB Johnson, and he was generally credited with her acquittal.
So he did a good job.
He did a good job. She did a good job.
She did a good job. Yeah, her testimony was how significant related to the verdict?
I think that it completely swung the jury. Now, there was this story that I tell about the trial where the police brought in someone who was very clearly perjuring herself to say that Clara was a prostitute and that Frank had picked her up as a prostitute. However, when she questioned, she immediately said, no, the police said that they'd not prosecute me for a prostitution conviction if I did this testimony. So everybody is lying in this book. That's one thing you need to know. But even besides the sort of own goal that the police had in that particular piece of testimony, Clara was able to describe the scene of her arrest and her questioning in a way that preyed on a whole bunch of assumptions about how men should treat women and how police officers should treat suspects that she very cleverly used. She describes being literally sort of pushed into a corner, first in her little room in the rooming house that she lived, then within the police headquarters. She's said that she was told that if she said that she murdered Frank in self-defense because he had tried to assault her, that not only would she never be convicted, but also that she could get a $500 reward offered by the Ontario government. And keeping in mind that the jury, who of course were white men, but they also were working class men, both from Toronto and from areas outside Toronto, such as Markham, that were more agricultural at that time. Some of them had bad run-ins with the police, and some of them perhaps very much sympathized with this notion of this person going about her business. She was a hard worker and being called in by the police and being pushed into a false confession. So she gave the performance of her life.
This case was clearly a big deal back in the day. Question is, how influential do you think it was in terms of dealing with or answering some of the bigger ethical questions around the justice system at the time?
Well, Clara's case was being brought up even to the 1940s around issues of how the police should try to push for confessions or not. But it has to be said that Clara disappears from Toronto not long after the trial. She actually joined the first Black vaudeville troupe as a dancer. I think the old prejudices of Toronto and some of the hypocrisies of Toronto continued on.
How did Toronto react after she was acquitted?
Well, immediately afterwards, the crowd in the courtroom cheered. She was accompanied back the 4 blocks from Adelaide and Church to Adelaide and York Street, where she lived in the slum then known as the Ward. There was a party in the restaurant at the base of her boarding house. Then, you know, the newspapers who were on her side said, this is a just verdict, and the newspapers who very much were not on her side said this is a low point for Canadian jurisprudence. And life sort of went on. I don't think that she made huge radical changes. Having said that, the thing that fascinates me about Clara is that we don't know that much about the lives of low-income women, certainly of Black women, and because 7 newspapers were so obsessed with Clara, we know where she lived, we know who she worked for, we even know what she ate the blood that she perhaps drank. Well, her mother was Scottish. Maybe she was making blood pudding. I don't know, So I think that it's a great opportunity to get a view of Toronto that maybe gives a slightly different view from the way that we generally think of Toronto in the 19th century.
Why do you think journalists and historians have got so many of the facts screwed up over the years?
Well, I guess it's two things. One is this journalist, Hector Charlesworth, who in his memoirs said that he sometimes made up fake news, but sometimes it was true. That is the main account of the case by someone who was actually there. And also because I think that it has taken until now for us to give credence to a woman who, was her wearing men's clothes eccentric, or was it a legitimate way, as she said herself, to feel safer, to have access to jobs that she otherwise wouldn't have had? I think that Clara, in a way, was waiting for a day like today to sort of come into her own as a character who was perhaps a little bit ahead of her time. And of course, there's so many resonances today with controversies about the police, with controversies around believing a woman when she says that she's been sexually assaulted, around the labels that get put on a single mother, because Clara was a single mother. I think that, Clara's time is today.
Just finally, where's she buried?
Oh, I wish I knew. I'm actually going to go after this taping and see where Frank Westwood is buried. But Clara disappeared soon after the trial. I haven't been able to find out what happened to her or to her daughters. But I hope that she has descendants somewhere, and maybe one will show up.
Frank Westwood, I think, is about a 20-minute walk that way, isn't he?
That's why I'm going afterwards.
Okay.
You're welcome to join me.
He's in Mount Pleasant Cemetery,
He's
isn't
in
he?
Mount Pleasant Cemetery,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's a great title. Did you come up with the title?
No.
Kudos to
My
whoever
wonderful
came.
publisher, Melissa Pitts, UBC Press. She's done that twice. She's taken a look at a book and she's gone, I've got a killer title for this book.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
Clara, at the door with a revolver, the scandalous black suspect, the exemplary white son, and the murder that shocked Toronto. Carolyn Weitzman, thanks for coming back to TVO.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.